While everyone's fighting for the spotlight, there's a growing group of people choosing to stay in the shadows. Not because they're hiding, but because they've figured out something most haven't. Neuroscience reveals that what they're doing might actually be rewiring their brain for success. Here's what silence on social media really tells us about someone's psychology. 1. The dopamine detachment. Every like, every comment, every notification triggers a dopamine hit in your brain, the same chemical released by gambling and addictive substances. People who don't post, they've essentially opted out of this reward loop. Behavioral psychology calls this delayed gratification mastery, the ability to resist immediate rewards for long-term well-being. Studies from Stanford show that people who can delay gratification have better life outcomes across the board. By not chasing that quick dopamine fix, they're training their brain to find fulfillment in deeper, more meaningful experiences. They're not missing out, they're leveling up their brain's reward system. 2. The observer effect. There's a fascinating concept in psychology called the spotlight effect. We dramatically overestimate how much people think about us. Most social media users fall victim to this cognitive bias, carefully curating every post, worried about judgment. But people who stay quiet, they've recognized a liberating truth. Most people are too busy thinking about themselves to think about you. This awareness comes from what psychologists call metacognition, thinking about thinking. They've mentally stepped back and realized that the audience they're performing for barely exists. This cognitive shift frees up massive mental energy that most people waste on impression management. Instead of performing their life, they're actually living it. 3. Identity integration versus identity performance. Here's where it gets really interesting. Social psychologists distinguish between two types of identity: authentic identity and performed identity. When you constantly post online, you create a digital self, a carefully edited version that often conflicts with who you actually are. This split creates what researchers call cognitive dissonance, psychological tension from holding contradictory self-concepts. People who don't post avoid this internal conflict. Their sense of self remains integrated, unified, whole. There's no gap between who they are and who they present to the world, because they're not presenting anything at all. Psychologist Carl Rogers called this congruence, alignment between your real self and ideal self, and research consistently links this trait to higher life satisfaction and mental health. 4. The scarcity principle in reverse. In marketing, scarcity creates value. The same applies to human attention. When someone rarely shares, their presence becomes more valuable, not less. This taps into what Robert Cialdini calls the scarcity principle. We want what's rare. People who post constantly become white noise, but someone who shares selectively, every rare post carries weight. But here's the deeper psychology. They're not playing games. They genuinely don't feel the need to constantly broadcast. This comes from intrinsic motivation, doing things for internal satisfaction rather than external reward. They're not creating scarcity strategically, they're living authentically, and scarcity is just a byproduct. 5. Reality distortion field immunity. Leon Festinger's social comparison theory explains how we constantly evaluate ourselves against others. Social media amplifies this to toxic levels. Everyone's comparing their behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. People who stay off social media develop what I call comparison immunity. They're not exposed to the constant barrage of curated perfection, so their self-worth isn't under constant assault. Neuroscience backs this up. Studies using fMRI scans show that viewing social media activates the same brain regions involved in reward processing and social pain. By limiting exposure, these individuals protect their neural pathways from this emotional roller coaster. They're not living in denial, they're living in reality. In reality, uncurated and unfiltered is actually more stable and satisfying. 6. The memory formation paradox. Here's something counterintuitive. Research shows that photographing experiences can actually impair memory of them. It's called the photo-taking impairment effect. When you're focused on capturing the perfect shot for Instagram, you're not fully present in the experience. Your brain is in documentation mode, not experience mode. People who don't post aren't failing to capture memories. They're actually encoding them more deeply. They're using what neuroscientists call elaborative encoding, fully engaging with an experience through multiple senses and emotions, which creates stronger, richer memories. Years later, while others scroll through forgotten photos, these individuals have vivid, embodied memories of actually living those moments.